and Learn is put on by the Vermont Agricultural Water Quality Partnership. I'm Julia King, the Communications Manager with the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, one of the 9 partners that are part of this partnership. Normally, Allie Wells, the VAWQP coordinator, runs these lunch and learns, but she's been on family medical leave, so I've been trying to take over. Here's just a little bit about the partnership. This is pulled from our latest strategic plan, which goes for the next 5 years. You can just see our vision, purpose, mission, goals, and objectives. This can all be found on our website, so I will not be reading all of that out to you. And then here's an overview of the 9 partners that are a part of VAWQP. And hopefully we're going to be seeing a lot of you at the annual meeting next week on Tuesday, March 31st. And I just wanted to give a heads up that we have planned another lunch and learn for Thursday, April 16th. This is going to be about reviewing the Vermont Pay for Performance program, and I'll drop in the chat a link to sign up for that Zoom program. Okay. So today we've got Matt Marcelino from VACD giving the 3rd and final installment in this Intro to GIS workshop series. So I'll pass it over to you, Matt.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Matt Marcelino. I'm the GIS specialist for VACD. Just going to share my screen real quick. I'm assuming you all can probably see that.
I can see it.
Great. So today I'm going to be talking about getting started with mapping, visualization, and we're going to talk a little bit about analyses. And so I'm going to start the webinar off with a little slideshow, and then we're going to move into ArcGIS Pro, where I'm going to show you a few techniques to help you visualize data within your maps. And so first off, like I said, we're going to talk about 2D and 3D information products that you can create using ArcGIS. And then we're going to also talk about how to identify and choose the best information products for your audience and your needs. And then ArcGIS also provides the tools to turn geographic data information so that you can understand where things are, how they relate, and what actions to take. So I'm hoping that you will learn why you should use spatial analysis to understand the world. And then we're going to also talk a little bit about spatial analysis workflow. So I'm hoping I got at this already, but the goals are to be able to differentiate between information products and also describe some of the questions that can be answered using spatial analyses and understanding the spatial analysis workflow. So in GIS, an information product is something made to convey geospatial or location-based information. Most, if not all, people have used GIS products while traveling or when learning about geography from a book or in a classroom. So there are many GIS information products available. A good example is that there are paper maps and atlases. There's digital map images, driver navigation software like Apple or Google Maps, as well as interactive online maps. So just to reiterate, any product that conveys location-based information could be considered as a GIS information product. So within ArcGIS, there are various information products, including static maps, web scenes, time maps, animation, charts, and story maps. And each of these products have very unique characteristics, and knowing those characteristics is really the first step toward providing your users the right information for their needs. Today, we're not going to talk about all of these. We're going to talk about static maps, web maps, and very, very briefly about story maps. So a static map is a stationary graphic that represents, or it's a stationary graphic representation of the spatial relationship of entities within an area. So a static map can be printed on paper or produced as a digital file. This map right here is just showing hiking trails around Middlebury. And the great thing about static maps is they provide a stable visualization of the spatial data. So you can either print these out, give it to them so people can have a physical copy, put it at a trailhead, or have it as a digital map on your phone or something of that sort. So they're really, really valuable. Whereas a web map is a web-based interactive visualization of geospatial content in 2 dimensions. So a web map can be viewed and carried on various devices, including iPads, cell phones, laptops, desktops, so on and so forth. And this map here is just showing invasive species locations within the Lewis Creek watershed. And the great thing about this is if this was on your phone or on your computer, you could click on the various layers within the map and get whatever information is available within those layers. So it's a really powerful tool to get at things that go beyond just where places are on a static map. And then there are story maps, which are interactive web applications that incorporate text, images, GIS information products like web maps or story maps, and other web content to help provide a narrative context for your data. So it's a really powerful tool for communication, regardless of if that's within your own organization or to other shareholders, stakeholders, um, or just communicating with the general public. So you can combine those static maps with text and videos to really tell a very compelling story to get people to care about what you're doing, or what water quality looks like within their watershed, or getting people to actually change practices, regardless of if that's raising the blade for mowing or farmers trying to reduce their runoff. Okay, so let's move into spatial analysis real quick and talk about what it actually is. So the first time you look at a map, you typically naturally start to analyze the features and the relationships that are presented. So you naturally begin compiling various types of information by identifying patterns, determining trends, or making decisions through the analysis. So this natural process of looking at and analyzing a map is a type of spatial analysis. This example here is a good, or this map down here could be a good example of that. So if a map shows property values within a historic district, you may speculate that the higher parcel values near Main Street are because these parcels are commercially zoned. However, you could also look at other things. So if a map shows vegetation, you might conclude that areas without trees are related to the steepness of the terrain and potentially the quality of the soil. So just by looking at a map and looking at the layers visually, you are doing some type of spatial analysis. That being said, the visual aspects of a map may give you a high level understanding of the given features, but it may not provide enough information to tell the complete story. So there may be more data that can be displayed on the map, or the map presentation may not give insight into the data's pattern or relationships. So you can use spatial analyses techniques to move beyond just that visual aspect of the data and go deeper into exploring locations, attributes, and the relationships of features. So to simplify that, spatial analysis is a great way of allowing people to understand the world in a very easy way, I suppose, or at least in a way that can be quantified. So there are very many benefits of spatial analyses. So the foundation is understanding the world by turning data into information to make better decisions. So spatial analysis can range from visual representations of features on a map to examining patterns or events over time. Additionally, you can do very advanced spatial analyses, such as mathematical modeling and machine learning. So, with many others as well. So, the more familiar you become with spatial analysis, the more you will find that it can provide a variety of benefits to you. Generally speaking, spatial analysis questions can be placed into 6 categories. So most people are familiar with data, statistics, and analytics in general. So when you add geographic questions to analyses, you also add a spatial component. So as you work to solve analytical problems, a vast number of spatial questions can be asked. So structuring these questions into groups can really help you better learn, understand, and communicate the importance of spatial analyses to problem solving. I'm not going to go into too much depth about these spatial analyses categories, but I wanted to make you aware of them. So category 1 is understanding where. At the most rudimentary level, you are lost if you don't know where you are or what is around you. So asking where is really the first question in any spatial analysis. Category 2 is measuring size, shape, and distribution. And this is really important because you may want to describe an object in terms of its geometry, such as area, length, perimeter, height, or volume. Or you may also want to describe the distribution of several objects within a landscape. Category 3 is determining how places are related. And this is important because you may need to describe and quantify the relationships among features to determine what is near, what is within, and or how something overlaps in time or space. And category 4 is important because you may need to find the best route to travel, the best location to build a new wastewater treatment facility, or maybe the best location for some type of management. And then category 5 is important because you may need to find patterns in data, such as hotspots or outliers, or you may also need to determine how those patterns change over time. So being able to detect and quantify patterns is really important as well. And then category 6, which is making predictions, is important because you may need to know, or you may need to determine how things may appear in the future, or how invasive species would spread. So it allows you to really make preparations, test how different management scenarios may impact different outcomes, so on and so forth. I find all of these categories to be really important, and depending on what you're doing, maybe measuring the size and shape of a distribution or determining how places are related is the most important thing. Maybe finding the best location for something is the most important thing for your objectives, or maybe you're interested in predicting, invasive species spread within a watershed over time. So really, what category you use is really going to be impacted by your question and whether or not what you're trying to do with your project. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the spatial analysis workflow. And the spatial analysis workflow begins with asking questions and it ends with making a decision. So spatial analysis is not a tool or a model that you can run. It's really a workflow that gives you a way to approach problem solving. It's also important to understand that some steps of the workflow may need to be revisited throughout your process. For example, as you run through an analysis, you might think of a new question, which would require some steps to be revised or repeated. So in that case, you would work through the steps based on the new question until you have the answer that you need to continue the analysis workflow. So essentially, to sum it up, the spatial analysis workflow contains specific steps that can be applied to analyses. So the first step of the workflow is to ask questions. So in particular, you should determine what your spatial questions are. Then you're going to move on to exploring and preparing your data. So you should always choose data based on your question. And you should then examine the data, ensuring that it's complete and at an appropriate quality. Additionally, this is the step where you should prepare the data if necessary. For example, this is when you might clip your data for your study area or update or edit the features and attributes. And then you're going to move on to the analysis and modeling phase. And this is where you're going to break down the problem into smaller components that can be modeled. This is also where you can quantify and evaluate your spatial questions. The next step will be interpreting your results, and this is where you will examine the results based on your spatial questions and identify any potential issues with the results. And then you're going to repeat or modify your analysis if necessary. And this is where you're going to make those refinements based on your results and use the workflow to answer any additional questions that may arise. So essentially, you would go from repeat or modify back to asking questions and then work up to that point again. And once you're happy with your analyses and you have answered your questions, you're going to move on to presenting your results because that's really important. So there's really not a lot of point of doing an analysis if you're not going to share your results or try to get something out of it. So this is where you will organize and visualize your results and show and discuss them with your stakeholders, partners, so on and so forth. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the last step will be the decision-making phase. This is where you will use your spatial analysis results to make decisions and take action. So the most important thing to remember is that the spatial analysis workflow is often not linear, so you can repeat any step to solve your problem. So if you're asking your questions and then you're exploring and preparing your data, maybe you have that gets you thinking about other things and gives you more questions. So then you can go back to the first part, or maybe you made it all the way to presenting your results and you learn new things from stakeholders, and that causes you to go back to that asking questions phase and then going through the process again. Or maybe you made it all the way to the end and you are trying to make a decision, but then the people who are making the decision want more information on something, then that could be used to ask more questions. Or maybe you made the decision and management is being implemented, but in the future you have more questions based on the management that was done that can help you start this process over again. So it's really super flexible. And what it's really doing is it's providing a good foundation as you work through your spatial problems, especially considering that you may find that some steps need and often do need to be revised and then repeated. So the spatial analysis workflow is a great model/tool that helps you think about how to approach your questions and your data analysis. So I'd highly recommend using this workflow whenever you're working in GIS or in a lot of different things, because it makes it a lot easier to keep track of what you're doing, as well as makes a lot of your analyses defensible. Okay. Great. So now I'm going to move on to some stuff in GIS. We talked about the theory a little bit. And we're not going to do really any analyses in this part. However, I did want to show you how to actually create a map in ArcGIS and show you where you would do some of your analyses. But this map right here, I'm assuming you all can see the map, or am I mistaken?
I can see it.
Okay, great. So this map right here, it displays the Woolumsac watershed in southwest Vermont. And we're going to use this map to show the location of historic sites throughout the watershed. So we're going to use several strategies to generalize the data and control its display across scale ranges so that the map will perform efficiently. So as you can see now, this map is really, really busy. It's not very good at showing us what we are interested in. You can see too, when I zoom in and out, that we are having a lot of performance issues. Things aren't necessarily showing up that should be showing up. I think I need to restart this real quick. Hold on one second. My hard drive that it's connected to disconnected earlier, so I think I just need to restart it. But essentially, there's a lot of issues performance-wise with this map that would be very challenging, depending on the system you're working on, to actually have those things display quickly and efficiently. So we're going to work through that a little bit. Hopefully, it's going to load quickly. It's not a big data set, so it should, but you never know with ArcGIS. Okay, great. So yeah, you can see that has a lot of information that may or may not take a while to load. At this point, I'm assuming that people know how to get data into ArcGIS. There are some tutorials available to show that, and I'm happy to talk about that if we have time as well. But at this point, I'm just assuming people know how to do this. One issue that we run into sometimes with web maps is, especially multi-scale web maps, is that ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online don't necessarily have the same zoom levels. In ArcGIS Pro, you can click down here and get whatever scale you want. Let's just say that for now. On top of that, these options are going to look different in ArcGIS Online as well. So what we're going to do first is we're going to try to get around that, and we're going to go to customize here in this little scale box right down here, and we're going to click on load in ArcGIS Online Bing Maps Google so that our scales are going to match up to what's on ArcGIS Online. So now if I hit OK, you can see now that these are different than what they were before, and this will match up nicely with ArcGIS Online. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to turn off all these layers for right now because they're really busy and not really valuable for what we're doing at this moment. But I wanted to show you how to create a definition query to limit the display of some of the buildings in the blueprint footprint layer, just because it's a good example of a very large data set that maybe you're not interested in having all of these buildings, especially maybe you're interested in having only, main buildings and no outbuildings. So you can use a definition query to remove smaller buildings or whatever you would like. It's essentially, they can be categorized as a selection type of generalization, where you can use attributes of the feature to determine whether it should be part of your map display or not. So the first thing I wanted to show you is if you right click and you go to selection and click select all, you can see down here that we have 11,262 features within this data set. So to do the definition query, you can either right click here on the layer of interest and go down to properties and click it, or you can double click. Before I do that, I'm just going to hit clear, but you can double click and it will open up your properties panel. If you come down here on the left and you scroll down to definition query, you can click here. You can click on new definition query. I know I don't say that word very well, but I blame my Vermont accent. You're going to scroll down to shape area. In this case, we want it to be greater than or equal to, and let's just say 90 to demonstrate what we're doing. Then you would hit apply here, okay. And now we go back to our selection and hit select all. You can see that our data set has been reduced by quite a bit. So, it's something you can do on pretty much any feature layer that you have. If you decided that you didn't want that anymore, you could go back. You can edit your queries to whatever you would like, or you can just get rid of them as well, which I'll do now because if this isn't a very big data set and it's not really going to impact what we're doing. But essentially, it's a way to help boost the performance of your web maps especially if you're posting them online and you don't want to have any of that lag necessarily. Okay. So the next thing that you can do as well is, let's say in this case, we were interested not necessarily in the individual little buildings because it's really hard to see at this scale, but we are interested in, population areas, maybe, let's say due to impervious surface or something like that. So what we can do is we can generalize this building footprints layer by aggregating them. So if you go to your geoprocessing, which can be found here, or under the analysis tab, tools, you can type in something that's called aggregate polygons, which you can do it with points, lines, and other things as well. But for this one, for aggregate polygons, you're going to essentially, or you're going to choose the feature of interest, and you're going to rename it to whatever works for you. In this case, we're just going to call this Walloomsac populated areas. For the aggregation distance, this is really going to be based on specifics to be specific to what you're interested in. In this case, we're just going to say 60 meters because for no particular reason, but just because that's what I chose. You can also, the great thing about all of these tools is you can always click on these arrows, these question marks, and it will give you more information, and you can click on more help and it'll bring you to a nice page that explains everything with whatever tool that you're using. On top of that, if you hover and click on the eyes, it gives you information on everything as well. So it's really, really valuable. So we're just going to click run. Shouldn't take too long with this data set. This tool can take, a little bit of time if it's a really big data set, but most of the data sets that people are working with, it's not going to take very long. So essentially, what this does, instead of drawing each building individually at this watershed scale of the map, those individual buildings the outlines aren't really necessary. So at this scale, the main purpose would really be to show where there are larger population centers. So this is a really powerful way to get at that. And you can see, we zoom in. If we turn this off, you can see that it matches up very, very nicely. If we made the aggregation distance larger or smaller, or larger rather, a lot of these would disappear as well. But maybe in this case, these are green spaces or whatever. So maybe we're not as interested in that. Additionally, if we weren't interested in, some of these smaller buildings that aren't really neighborhoods, we could also adjust the minimum area to, remove some of those from the actual aggregation. So if I was to make that minimum area, let's say 90, like we did with that definition query, we would not be seeing these little buildings as well. But for this case, that's fine. So we have two different layers that are essentially showing us similar things. So we don't really want either of them to be open at the same time, especially within a web map. So if we're zoomed in here, this isn't really valuable. This aggregation, this is more valuable. So what we can do is we can set up scale ranges for each of these layers so that we can decide where we want to see the each layer. So I'm just gonna come down here real quick. And essentially, you would scroll in and out to kind of figure out where you want to see these buildings. And I think in this case, this scale probably would be really good. So what you would do is we're going to first click on our watershed buildings. We're going to come up to feature layers. And in this case, we are going to go for minimum scale. You can see that there's none. You can also do custom, current, or all of these other scales. So we're just going to do current. And essentially what that's doing is we can only see this if we are at minimum that 1 in 36,112 scale. So if we zoom in, we can still see it. If we zoom out, we no longer see that layer. We can also do the same thing for the populated areas. So instead of doing the minimum this time, we're going to do the maximum. So as you can see here now, this populated areas is turned off. This building footprints layer is on, but if we were to scroll out, you can see here that it turns off the watershed building footprints, and you just have this aggregated populated area. So this really helps boost performance, as well as making it so that you can see different data sets at different scales. So it's really, really, really valuable for visualization purposes. You can also do it with roads. I'm just going to turn these off for now. So at this scale, you can see that the roads are really, really challenging to see, especially here in Bennington. Up here, not so bad with these littler roads. But when you zoom in here, it's like, okay, this makes more sense. This is easier to see. So what we want to do in this case is to make this map less busy as well if we want to have these roads up. So you're going to do something very similar to what we did, except it's a little bit different. So you can click on Willemstech Watershed Roads, you can click on Symbology up here, or you can right click and go to Symbology, whatever is easier. And you're going to see the Symbology pane. In this case, I have the national or state roads, which are primarily going to be the little roads up here, turned off, and trails turned off. And I have it separated into state highways, smaller roads, and then US highways. So you're going to click on the scale right here. And you're going to see, actually, let me make this bigger so we can see the whole thing. You're going to see all of those options here that we were seeing before. So in this context, let's try to make these local roads not visible at this scale. So what you would do is you would click, since we want to see it at a minimum, we would click on the left here, this little slider bar, which you can also move like this, but you can click on it and get to a slider, and let's just say we don't want to see them above the scale of 1 in 72,224. So now you can see, okay, we only see these bigger roads. Then when we zoom in to the appropriate scale, we can see these smaller roads as well. So you can do these scale limits with entire data sets. You can do them with specific features based on a category within a data set as well. So it's a really, really, really valuable method to make your maps easier to visualize, as well as more appropriate, or not more appropriate, but easier for computers to handle for rendering and stuff of that nature. When it comes to geoprocessing, I'm not going to get into any other analysis besides the aggregate polygons, but you can find any of your tools by typing things like if you wanted to clip, you can find your clip tools, buffer, so on and so forth. Sometimes you can type in, I don't know, let's say habitat model, and it can try to help you find those as well, depending on what you're doing. So it's a really powerful tool. If you can't find your tool by doing that in here, or by the search tool, you can also go through here in the geoprocessing toolboxes, and they have them organized in toolboxes that are based on a theme. If you still can't find it, you can also search online and kind of type in what type of analyses you're trying to accomplish and see if there's an ArcGIS tool for that as well. So geoprocessing analyses in ArcGIS is really simple, really easy for the most part, user friendly. But we're not going to talk about that anymore. Instead, we're going to move on to how you actually make a map. So making maps in ArcGIS is really easy as well. In ArcGIS Pro, you have so much functionality, so much. It's a really, really easy system to really get at what you're looking at. Move on. I'm going to move to this map because I've already imported, these historic sites and stuff like that into it, and then made these labels, which I'm not going to talk about how to make these today, but it's really, really easy. And if anybody has questions about them, we can chat about them afterwards or later. But essentially, when you're trying to make a map, you're going to come up here to new layout, and you have all of these various options of how to make a map based on the size paper map you want to produce. These, even though they're the size paper that you want to produce, these can also be uploaded onto ArcGIS online as well. Generally speaking, you're not going to really worry about your layouts that much when you're uploading to ArcGIS online, because you're usually more concerned with the actual data layers that will be shared, and then you'll be able to produce your map on there as well. But you can produce entire maps within ArcGIS Pro as well for online from start to finish. But essentially, you're going to click on your new layout. In this case, we're just going to choose the landscape 8x5x11. It's going to bring up a very blank page. So it's not actually connected to anything. It's not connected to any of these maps that we have. So to do that, you actually have to create a map frame within this document. So what you're going to do that is you're going to click on whatever map that you are interested in. You can see all of your maps that are within your project here. I have a lot of different projects open in here because if this is just a project that I'm using to show other tutorials, but essentially you're going to click where you're interested in, and then you're going to drag your map out, which is really nice and easy to do. If you want to adjust this within here, you can right click and or click on it and hit Q, and it's going to activate your map so you can move it around in here. You can also come down here, right click, zoom the layer when the map is activated, which is the easiest way of getting all the information that you have within a map. When you're done with that, you want to make sure that your map is no longer activated, which in this case it still is. So you want to come up here in the layout and you want to hit the close activation here. So now if I can't drag this around anymore. So when it comes to maps, you generally want to have a few different things so that people can actually read and get from your map what you want them to. So I generally, excuse me, I generally try to start with a title because knowing what people are looking at, knowing what you're looking at is really important. So you can click on one of these text boxes up here and you can do the same exact thing where you are dragging a box out and then you can type your text in here. So we can say Woolloomsac River Watershed Historic Sites just for now. And then you can click on your text ribbon over here and you can do all sorts of things. So in this case, let's make the text bold, which click out of that. Let's make it bold. Let's make it much, much, much bigger. And you can also choose where you would like it to be. Oops. Within your map. And so if this was, over this, if we came to a range and we wanted this for some reason to be behind that, you can hit send backwards. So essentially it works a lot like PowerPoint in that regard. The nice thing with these is you can also move these around however you see fit. So there's a lot of options and functionality available. You can adjust their position within a place as well by clicking here. So there's a lot of great functionality when it comes to that. The other things that you generally are going to want are a north arrow. So you can see up here that there's a lot of different options for those. So on north arrows, you can just come here and you can choose whatever one you want. And to size it, the easiest thing to do is just to make it by dragging it out. If you want it bigger or smaller, you can adjust this and you can just put it in your map where appropriate. Follow the next thing that I generally go to next is going to be a scale bar, just so people can tell how far things are from each other fairly easily. So you have all of these different options within here to choose what kind of scale bars you would like. You can choose in miles or in kilometers, but essentially you just click on the one that you were interested in. And once again, you can just drag it out. The nice thing about this too is as you adjust it, it automatically adjusts the scale bar to be accurate to your map. And you can also come up here to your scale bar. You can change your you can change your fonts. So let's just say Times New Roman for now. You can make them bold, italic. You can do basically whatever you want in here. Additionally, you can change your scale bars if you aren't too happy with it pretty easily by coming into here and then just clicking, and then it automatically changes it to whatever you'd like. On top of that, you can also adjust these ticks as well as where and what numbers are being displayed. So you can adjust things in your fitting strategy. You can change the number of subdivisions. So if I go to 2, you can see now that we don't have as many of these ticks. You can also get rid of divisions entirely. So it's a really valuable, easy to use tool. You can also change the units. So maybe you want it in feet, maybe you want it in kilometers, so on and so forth. You can change what you want the label to be, and then you can also change where these numbers are as well. So let's just say above center or after labels or above left. So there's a lot of functionality available with these scale bars as well. And lastly, legends are really important, and it's going to work exactly the same way, where you are going to drag and click and display your legend. This legend is essentially useless because there's way too much information here, but it's really easy to adjust in a lot of different ways. But in this context, for this tutorial, you can literally just go through and turn on and off what you're interested in or not. So now you have a much cleaner legend, and you can also go into here to change your other things as well. You can double click on your legend, which will open up this element tab, which you can do all sorts of things in as well by changing a lot of different things, changing how things are displayed, so on and so forth. So let's say I wanted to keep my group layer name, which in this case I wouldn't, but if you did, you can also have things grouped in certain ways as well. So the legend is really, really valuable as well. And then lastly, these little credits here are really annoying in my opinion. And a lot of times you don't actually want them on your maps. So to get rid of those, you can click on dynamic text. And I'm trying to remember, I always forget what this layer, what it's actually called, the thing. But essentially, you're going to find whatever that's called, the surface layer. There we go. You're going to make a box. All that stuff that was here is going to come up to here. And there's really no way of getting rid of that. So it'll come back every time if you delete it. But what you can do is you can just drag it off. So if you wanted to share your map, which you probably would, there are different types of things you can do as well. You can either print them out by clicking on print. You can, use your printers, all sorts of things. You can choose all of the different things that you would like to do, including output quality if you are printing. That being said, as well, I should mention you should name your layouts or all of your tabs so you know exactly what they are. So in this case, like I would come here and I'd click on properties, and you would want to rename your thing to whatever you want it to be. Since I already have a layout already for this, I'm not gonna name it the same thing because I don't want to mess it up. But it makes it easier so that when you're saving things or loading things, you know what you're looking at. On top of that, you can also export your layers to digital documents as well, regardless of if that's a JPEG, a PDF, TIFF, so on and so forth. So generally speaking, what I ended up doing is I don't normally print things directly from ArcGIS. I usually export things to a PDF or a JPEG so that it's easier to store and then easier to print in the future or distribute to people. So it's really easy to do. Essentially, your options are really going to depend on what you choose. So if you have a PNG, these options are going to be different than if you had the JPEG and the PNG should be fairly similar, but there's different compressions. So you can adjust things like that. Or if you have a PDF, you might have some other things that are different as well. So it's really what you see here is going to be based on the imagery or the file type that you choose, but it's really quite simple to figure these types of things out as well. And essentially, you're going to hit export, or you can save a preset as well, but you're going to hit export, and it's going to export it to wherever you wanted it to go. I'm not going to do that again for real, but then you can have something like this, where you have a really nice map layout that you can distribute to partners. I know that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, or yeah, whatever you guys need. I think we have 7 more minutes, just 7-ish more minutes. I see there's a question. How much of this can be done on Arc Online? You can do a lot on ArcGIS Online, but you're not going to have as much that's a hard word, customizability. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'm using. It's not going to be as customizable in ArcGIS Online or easy to do in ArcGIS Online as you would have in ArcGIS Pro. That being said, you can do a lot of these things in ArcGIS Online. I think honestly, a lot of the areas where ArcGIS Online struggles compared to ArcGIS Pro is, like I said, the functionality of and ease of making these nice map layouts, in my opinion, and also you're not able to do as many analyses on ArcGIS Online as you would be able to inside of ArcGIS Pro. Any other questions, comments, concerns? It's okay if there aren't any either. Cool. Well, if any other questions come up, I'm happy to answer them and walk you through anything that we did today, or other questions that you may have. ArcGIS Pro is very easy to use once you learn it. It's just that learning curve can be a little bit hard. So yeah, if there's any questions, I can always point you in the right direction or help you out as well. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. And I saw Jim put in the chat, let's have a future training on labeling so we can look into having that. Just like the past two webinars, this one has been recorded and we'll get it up on YouTube and I'll share it out in the April VAWQP newsletter. But if you need it earlier, just send me an email. And we really appreciate, Matt, you doing this series of trainings for us. It's been very helpful.
Good, I'm glad.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.